Hey there, fiber friends. My name is Sarah. This is what I affectionately refer to as my Yarn Lab. And today I've got the first inaugural, if you will, episode of what I'm going to call Yarn Lab Quilts. So if you're familiar with this channel, then you know that it is primarily up until this point been a knitting, spinning, fiber arts related channel. But like many a crafter before me, I have gone down a new rabbit hole with my fiber arts crafting, and that is into the world of quilting. So much so that I now always have 1, 2, 10, several many quilting projects on the go, and I thought that I would share them with you in a separate format for my more regular lab report updates or my spinning videos. And so Yarn Lab Quilts was born. Each episode of this format of video on my channel is going to feature progress on a single project, and today I've got for you my Tula Nova quilt. And here it is. It is a work in progress, and I will pop a photo in here to show you exactly where I am in this project. For those of you who are not familiar with the Tula Nova, it is an English paper piecing project. That is to say that it is hand stitched, and the fabrics that are stitched in are stabilized with a piece of paper backing. So you can see the ones along the edge still have their papers, whereas the ones that are in the center of this quilt top, the papers have already been removed. And I've been working on this project for I think a little over 2 years now. The project is designed by Tula Pink. She is a quilting fabric designer and pattern designer and quilter extraordinaire, and all of the fabrics that I'm using in my Tula Nova are hers as well. Primarily I'm using a selection of her true colors to give the rainbow effect that I have going around my medallion quilt. And in addition to her true colors, I am using corresponding rainbow fabrics from my Tula Pink fat quarter stash. Because one of the first things that I chose to do when I dove down this quilting rabbit hole was very quickly acquire a vast stash of fat quarters. That's a quarter yard cut of fabric from Tula Pink amongst many other fabric designers. And I thought this project would be a great place to put them to use. So you can see I am quite far along on this project, but still have many medallions to incorporate into my main EPP portion of the quilt top before appliquing this whole thing onto a larger piece of fabric for quilting. So what I'm working on right now is finishing up the last of the outer row of EPP blocks or medallions, whichever you like to call them. I've already finished all of my stars using one of her hexie prints, one of her minerals, and then her solids called True Colors as well, one of Tula Pink's solids. This one's actually a terrible example. This peach is the only fabric in the quilt that is not a Tula Pink fabric, but I needed an orange to sort of complete my rainbow. So I finished all of the star blocks, and I'm working on the feature print star blocks that go in between. I've got 2.5 left to stitch together. You can see I've got the pieces ready to go for a couple of blocks, and I am working on this one. And I wanted to cut right now to actually a video that I put together showing you, for those who are not familiar with English paper piecing, how I prepped my fabrics to go ahead and start stitching my block together. So I'll cut that footage in here, and you can see how this block originated just as some pieces of fabric. All right, so I've got 2 more of these blocks that I need to cut, baste, and sew together to put into my Tula Nova. So this is the example block here. I'm using a sort of feature print in the center, one of the Tula Pink's palms and stripes. This is the palms for the triangles, and the diamonds I'm doing in a tiny stripe, also with Tula Pink fabric, of course. So that's my example. These are the fabrics I'm going to use for this particular block. And in addition to my fabrics, I need my paper pieces. And these came pre-cut for me in the Tula Nova paper pieces kit from paperpieces.com, although I did buy it at one of our sort of local quilt shops. I'm almost out of pieces since I'm almost finished this quilt, but they come pre-cut just in a bag along with the pattern. And then you also have the option to buy the acrylic cutting templates. And for this block, I'll need the large pentagon, I'll need this triangle, and this diamond piece. You don't need the acrylic cutting templates, but they are quite helpful for fussy cutting, and they do speed up the process. You can always just place your paper piece on your fabric and then draw a seam allowance around that paper piece. That's an option as well. So we'll start with the main feature print here. These are just fat quarters. And I'm going to feature one of these squirrels, and it's a little bit easier to draw on the reverse side of the fabric. So this is the squirrel that we want to feature. Here is my template, and I'm just going to turn it to get as much of that squirrel in frame as possible. The template has the seam allowance, so your visible bit of fabric is going to be from this inside line and sort of the frame, and this outside bit is the seam allowance. So I've got it where I want it, and you could use a fabric pen. I'm just using sort of a regular pen to mark my lines here. And now you could have used your acrylic template with a rotary cutter to cut my shape out. My preference, however, is to just cut that out with scissors. So as simple as that. You can see I haven't bothered to take the time to press my fabrics in advance. Once it's basted onto the paper, it'll be stretched nice and flat, ready for sewing. Now, to baste this onto the paper, you could baste it with a needle and thread. I believe that was sort of the traditional way to baste for English paper piecing. However, glue basting is, in my opinion, faster, and I mean, let's save time where we can on these lengthy hand stitching projects. I'm going to use a glue pen. I've found them, this Fawns and Porter brand, as well as Soline. The refills are fit interchangeably with both brands, and I have both pens. The pens are basically identical between the two brands. You don't need to splurge on the pens and refills. I've also glue basted quite a bit of English paper piecing just using Elmer's washable glue. It works just as well. The only difference, especially for smaller pieces, is that the pen allows you to get a finer line of glue on, where you get a bit of excess glue, I find, with the Elmer's. So really simple and straightforward. Just putting a line of glue along the edge of my paper piece and using my finger to press the fabric around, rotate, and you can see that my line of glue is not right to the edge of the paper. There's a gap there. That's sort of the nice thing about the glue pen. It allows you to really do that nicely. That way, where you're stitching in the crease, you don't get any glue that you have to stitch through. In comparison, especially on smaller pieces, it can be trickier to get your glue on neat and tidy with the Elmer's glue stick. Trickier, but not impossible. And both are washable. Both will come out of your fabric no problem. And I haven't had any issues with the color, for instance, of the glue staining the fabric. not only does that purple color and this blue color fade with exposure to air, it washes out nicely either way. So, like I said, glue pens are great, especially for tinier pieces, but you can get by fairly well with the Elmer's glue. And there you go. My main print is basted and ready to be incorporated into my quilt. Now I'll cut my triangles using the palms. And again, I'm going to work from the back of the fabric. And I have been fussy cutting these. You can see that the dot is in the same place in each triangle. And the way that I've been doing that is to just line up the Tula Pink logo on my template here with the dot that I want on my fabric. And then trace around. You can see that my seam allowance is running into the selvage, but not the piece that'll be visible. So there's one, and I like to try and minimize the amount of wasted fabric. I'm sure most people do as well. So it's nice when you can sort of puzzle piece these onto your fabric as best you can. 2, and I need 5 of these for this block. And then I'll cut those out. Before I do, I'll go ahead and trace on my diamonds onto the striped fabric. Like I said, this is the pinstripe from the tiny stripes from Tula Pink's True Colors. Since that stripe doesn't show through to the reverse side of the fabric very well, I will go ahead and trace these ones onto the front of the fabric. And all I'm doing is aligning my template parallel to that stripe, matching the point on either side with the same stripe going in, and then tracing it. Come down the fabric and put the second one in. Again, try and line it up. The third one I'm going to take from right up here. So I'll cut those out and then show you how I'm going to base them. So I've got my shapes cut out. I've got my, backwards corresponding papers, and I'm just going to go ahead and start basting these. So just trying to center my triangle between the bits of pom-pom showing around it, and go along the side, glue, fold, turn, glue, fold, turn, glue, fold, turn. Easy peasy. And with my diamond. Glue, fold, turn. Glue, fold, turn. I do 2 sides on the bottom half and then the 2 top halves. That way both of my dog ears are pointed in the same direction. I'll show you what I mean. When your corner is less than about 60 degrees, when you fold it over, you get these little dog ears, and you can see both of my dog ears are pointed in the same direction. On this one, I've got 2 pointing up and 1 pointing this way. I just try and be consistent with the way that my dog ears are pointed when I glue baste. Now to sew, you need thread. You'll find a lot of EPP tutorials recommend specifically the Aurifil 50 weight 100% cotton. You'll also see Wonderfil Deco Bob recommended for EPP. This is a polyester thread. And you can also use just any old regular polyester thread. It depends. This is going to be your cheapest option, sort of intermediate, and your more expensive option. All three are going to be perfectly serviceable for the job. The key is to pick a thread color that matches closely to at least one of your two fabrics. For needles, you'll see like a milliner's number 10, I think it's called, needle recommended often. Quite honestly, I have some of those more expensive needles. I also have inexpensive needles from Walmart. I couldn't tell you which this is, likely the later. But what you want is an eye that's easy for you to thread, a needle that has a length that's comfortable in your hand, and something as fine as you can manage. Then, to hold your pieces together for sewing, so we're going to attach the triangles along the edge here. You have options as well. You can quite simply hold them together with your hand and whip stitch along. I'm kind of fond of using these Wonder clips that you can find inexpensively, and just popping that clip on to hold my pieces together as I start to whip along. As I get to it, I can pull it off. You'll also see these sew tights. It's a little plastic bar with a pair of magnets on it and a metal piece that slips behind. And you can use sew tights to hold your pieces together. So 3 options there. The sew tights are nice for some things. These clips are also nice. It's sort of personal preference, or for me, it's what I happen to have on hand and not lost in my craft room. So you just need to hold your pieces together. You need to cut a length of thread and thread your needle. So I've got my pieces held together with the sew tight. I've got my needle threaded. I don't bother to knot my needles, my threads on my needles when I thread them. I've got, to the best of my abilities, the 2 corners of my triangle lined up with the 2 edges, corners of my pentagon. And then the stitch is, let's make sure then the stitch is quite simply through just catching the fabric of both pieces and sliding your needle on top of that paper. And I secure with a knot every time I start a new thread, and also at every corner. And then I just whip along. So I'm just sliding my needle across, catching both fabrics and sort of sitting on top of that paper. You don't want to puncture the paper, but we'll see if we can get, so this is a paper that's been used and removed, and you can kind of see little notches along the edge of it where the needle hasn't punched it so much as it's sort of pushed an indentation into the edge of your paper. The less you are puncturing the paper, the easier this will be on your hands. The less glue that is in that fold, the easier this will be on your hands. The other thing that I use when I'm doing this is a thimble. So it's sort of user's choice. I've used these rubberized ones quite a bit. My preference is these peel and stick leather thimbles. So it's just a little piece of peel and stick leather. And everyone is going to have the spot on their hand where that needle is driving from be a little bit different. I happen to stitch from my ring finger, and I pop a leather thimble on here because when you're doing a lot of this, you will get, your skin will get irritated from driving that needle across. And so I highly recommend some sort of thimble that suits your sewing preferences. Anyways, that's how I've been putting all of my pieces together into blocks and then into the final quilt. So hopefully that was helpful and interesting if you are new to the idea of English paper piecing, or if you're a long time hand stitcher in that style. Maybe you picked up a new idea. That's just the way that I've been doing my blocks and my pieces for this project and many others. Like I said, I've only got to finish this one off, and I've got 2 more that are basted and ready to go. And then I need to get them joined into the main quilt. You can see that in this outer roll, I've got this one here joined in with this monkey from the Monkey Wrench collection, then a yellowy green star, then we've got a unicorn, a deeper green star. So I'm just working my way around the outside, putting these blocks in. And then the very last thing is going to be a set of triangles just to close up that gap there. And those triangles will be cut from this hexie fabric to sort of keep a consistent theme throughout, since I've used that hexie in the triangles at the center, in this round of diamonds, and so a little bit of hexie around the outside. Anyways, I hope that was kind of interesting. I'll stand up and try and give you a better view of this quilt top that's not just a picture. So you can see it's a great big old rainbow of fabrics, and it represents quite a few hours of hand stitching. But I'm being a knitter and a spinner and a crocheter. Handwork is certainly not a foreign concept to me. And this has just become a lovely new form of hand stitching to sort of incorporate into my daily crafting and to change things up when your wrists and hands get a little tired from knitting. Next time I share a Yarn Lab Quilts report with you all, it will be about appliquing this main quilt top onto the background fabric, because all of the English paper piecing will be done at that point. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, please feel free to go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Even if you're not interested in the quilting content, there's tons of yarn content. If you're not interested in the yarn, hopefully there will be lots more quilting content for you in the future. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.